To this now, about 26 million South Africans are on social media, indicating a significant rise in participation. Now, to help us look at the trends at how South Africans are using the platforms at their disposal and if the social media activity translates to action on the ground, I'm joined by Zanyiwe Asare, a tech expert. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, what demographic groups can you just describe to us are the most active on social media, and are there specific differences in usage patterns amongst gender, age, and socioeconomic status?
Absolutely, and thank you for having me tonight. So when we look at social media in South Africa, it's a very interesting place. It's fascinating, it's wild, it's loud, it's messy, and you've asked a really good question. Do we all use the same platforms? Do we all use it at the same time in the same way? So absolutely not. So when we look at, let's say, WhatsApp, for instance, that's for everybody. That's for everyday communication. You've got your grandma, your grandpa, your mom, your dad, your uncles, politicians, everybody's using that. And we typically see a lot of information being passed, whether true or not, a lot of misinformation, disinformation. But this is where information flows, you know. Then we've got the likes of, the complete opposite, the Gen Z's playground. This is, the new thriving, upcoming likes of TikTok. This is where we see influencers, really short type of activism, type of information that's passed around. So this is, where you get your Gen Z's really thriving and sometimes making money out of it, even on a global scale. Then we go to the middle ground. You've got your Facebooks, also where a lot of rumors, misinformation, disinformation thrives. But this is sort of that connector. We've got people in the rural areas and townships, but also in suburban areas that commonly use this. And then you see the cousin of Facebook. We've got Instagram, more lifestyle. You've got your socialites, people that are, posting private jets, they fancy meals. And then we've got LinkedIn, the hoity-toity, showing your academic and, working muscle. You're flexing who you've been talking to, what you've been doing, economic and political discourse, discussed at a high level. You'll get, tweets, you could say, of information about Davos and the likes. And then you've got Twitter, which can be messy, but has also been seen to really get a lot of information flowing there with the younger generation.
Speaking of X, previously known as Twitter, a lot of the times it's used as a barometer in terms of, especially if we talk politics in South Africa, where we thought things were going to go a certain way. Certain political parties seem to have a liking of a certain group, but it didn't quite translate in that way when it came to the polls. In what way has social media influenced political discourse in the country?
I mean, if you look outside of the borders of South Africa, we could say that it really has. I mean, we see a lot of campaigns like Black Lives Matters, the Brexit, both in the UK and the US. And you see how this has really created a fora for dialogue around race relations, around economic policies that impact minorities. Now, when we bring it back to South Africa, like you said, we've seen a lot of discourse. People say a lot of things, very opinionated, but it doesn't always translate to the polls. And the main reason here is it's easy to retweet, it's easy to like. But when it comes to standing in the long queues at the voting polls, that takes time, it takes resources, it takes long queues. And when you look at the voter sentiment, for instance, in a country like South Africa, it's much lower than what it should be. For the Rainbow Nation and, this beacon of light that we hold in Africa, we don't, what happens online is not necessarily translated in real life.
Lastly, Zanyiwe, I mean, how do we then compare in terms of our social media usage to other leading countries in Africa, such as Nigeria and Kenya and the rest of the globe?
So, I mean, when we look at South Africa, we've got a lot of potential. One thing we need to acknowledge is we take a lot of things lightly. It's very serious things. We take it as a joke. We're a humorous country, sometimes to our detriment, sometimes not so much. When we look at the internet, for instance, the real question here is, are we meaningfully connecting as South Africans? What does that mean? So if you take it to Nigeria, for instance, with NSAS, we saw a lot of young people going online, but also physically going in real life, asking for change, demanding change. Actually, people lost their lives. And we take it to Kenya quite recently with tax reforms, where young people said they want to change in leadership. They want leadership to hear them, and they were willing to risk their lives. They were willing to disappear. They were willing to challenge status quo, not just online but physically. And I think once we as South Africans kind of, get over this phase that we are separated from online spaces, we could really have a lot of traction and see a lot of change for the good, coming not just for young people but the country at large. And I think we've got a long way to go in that regard. And I think the crux of this is social media literacy, making people understand the importance of connectivity and what that could mean to leapfrog South Africa to a leader once more in that regard on the continent.
Most certainly, knowing how to use those tools effectively. Zanyiwe Asare, a tech expert, thank you so much for your insights and for joining us this evening.